The year was 1953, the sun just beginning to bleed over the flat Texas plains when the world first saw him. Eli Mercer, a man built like a mountain, his shadow long enough to swallow the dust. He rode no horse now, just an old Chevrolet pickup, the kind that rattled when the wind sighed too hard. People said Eli had once been a rodeo star, a man who could tame any bull and charm any crowd. But those days were buried beneath too many nights and too much whiskey. He lived alone on a patch of dead land with no wife, no children, and no reason left to speak to anyone. That morning, he was just passing through the small town of Hollow Creek, a place with one diner, one gas pump, and one secret waiting on the side of the road. She couldn't have been more than 6, barefoot and dusty, standing by a broken fence like she'd been waiting for a miracle. Eli slowed his truck, engine grumbling low. "You lost, kid?" he asked through the window, his voice deep, gravel mixed with kindness he didn't remember he had. The little girl looked up, squinting through the morning sun. "No, sir, I'm waiting." Her tone was certain, too certain for a child. "Waiting for who?" Eli asked. "For you." He almost laughed, but there was something about her eyes, not blue, not green, just soft and tired, the kind of tired that no child should carry. He shut off the engine and stepped out, boots crunching gravel. The girl hugged her rabbit closer. "My mama said the man who stops will have kind eyes." "You do." Her words struck him harder than he wanted to admit. "Where's your mama now?" he asked. The girl's lip trembled, smoke still whispering from the hood. Eli's stomach turned cold. He ran. The woman inside couldn't have been older than 30, her head resting against the steering wheel, blood darkening her collar. The crash must have happened just before dawn. Eli called for help, but he already knew. She was gone. The little girl, quiet as a ghost, appeared beside him. "She said you'd come," she whispered. "She said I should tell you my name." He asked questions Eli couldn't answer. The sheriff sighed. "We'll get child services for the girl. Please don't let them take me. You need a wife. And I need a dad." The words fell like a prayer and a curse all at once. Everyone froze. Eli felt the world tilt. He'd buried his wife and unborn son 10 years ago. A fire that stole everything. And he'd sworn never to be anyone's anything again. But as Lucy clung to his leg, the sheriff, scratching his neck uncomfortably, something inside. "I'll keep her till they find her kin," he said finally. The sheriff nodded, half relieved, half wary. "Your ranch still good for a kid?" "Ain't much left to it," Eli said. "But it's dry, quiet, and honest." He didn't add the part about the ghosts that live there. The sky bruised purple and silver. Lucy sat beside him, clutching her rabbit and staring out the window. "Mama said people carry their hurt in different ways," she whispered. "You carry yours like a big coat." Eli glanced at her, caught off guard by the words. "Your mama sure talked a lot." "Huh, only when she was scared." When they reached the ranch, the house stood lonely against the fading light, all creaking boards, one working lamp, and the smell of rain-soaked dust. She looked up at the sky and smiled faintly. "It feels like she's here." Eli swallowed hard and looked away. "You'll sleep in the room by the stairs. It's warmer there." He thought she'd cry that night. Most kids would. But she didn't. Instead, she prayed softly, hand trembling on the frame, or feeling, for the first time in a decade, like he wasn't truly alone anymore. When dawn came, Lucy was already up, feeding the hens, her laughter cutting through the morning fog. Eli watched her from the porch, coffee steaming in his hands. The sound didn't belong on his land. It was too alive, too clean. But deep down, under all his scars and whiskey memories, it began to sound like home. What he didn't know was that Lucy's words, the ones her mama had whispered before dying, "You'll find him. He's the one who lost everything," were about to drag his buried past into the light again. And before this story ended, Hollow Creek would remember that even the coldest hearts can burn again, but only after breaking one more time. For a man who'd sworn never to let another soul near him. It had been 2 days since the crash, 2 long days of silence between them, except for Lucy's soft humming in the evenings, the kind that echoed through the empty house like something holy. The ranch hadn't heard laughter or a child's voice since Eli's wife, Clara, died in that fire 10 years ago. Now, Lucy's voice touched every corner, dusting off memories he'd buried in the dirt. Eli tried to keep distance. He cooked her breakfast, fixed the porch, and spoke as little as possible. "You eat slow, girl. Ain't no rush in food," he'd mutter. "Yes, sir," she'd say, trying to mimic his calm. She never called him mister. Never called him sir with fear. She called him with hope. That morning, the wind carried the scent of rain and secrets. Lucy was out in the barn, petting an old horse named Rusty, whispering things only a child would dare say to an animal. Eli leaned against the barn door, watching her. "He likes you," he said gruffly. "He don't like many. He knows I ain't gonna leave," Lucy replied, her tone simple and sharp as truth. It hit him, the kind of line that rips through the quiet. "Who told you I was gonna leave?" he asked. Lucy turned, eyes serious beyond her years. "Mama said people like you always try to leave before they get left again." Eli froze, every word of hers digging into the parts of him he'd tried to numb. He didn't answer, just turned and walked back toward the house. That night, he couldn't sleep. His gaze drifted to the picture still hanging above the fireplace, his wife, Clara, smiling in her Sunday dress. "She's got your heart," he muttered. The kind of confession no one was meant to hear. By the next morning, the sheriff came knocking. "Eli," he said, hat in hand, "we found something about that woman. Lucy's mama." The words sliced through the quiet like thunder. Lucy was inside, sketching on the floor with a dull pencil. Eli stepped outside. "Go on." The sheriff hesitated. "Her full name's Marjorie Claiborne. Used to live down in Silver Bend, not far. But here's the thing. She was married once. Husband named Caleb Claiborne. Fella disappeared in 47. Some folks say he ran. Others say she ran from him." Eli's jaw tensed. "You saying she might have been hiding?" "Maybe, but there's more. That car she crashed in, it wasn't hers. Belonged to a man in Hollow Creek. Fella named Jonas Briggs." Eli frowned. "Don't know him. Neither do most. Fella's got money, influence, keeps to himself. But if she was running from something, or someone, Briggs might know." The sheriff left. Eli stood there, feeling the weight of something heavy in the air. He turned back toward the house, with smoke rising behind them. "Lucy," he said softly, kneeling down, "where'd you see this smoke?" "In my dreams," she whispered. "Mama said fire always finds the truth." His unborn child, his will to live. He'd been in town that night, selling cattle. By the time he came back, the house was half ash and the rest pain. The sheriff had said it was an accident, but some part of him had always wondered, what if it wasn't? He began to think that fate didn't work in straight lines. It curved, it circled. Sometimes it sent you a little girl who spoke like an old soul just to make you face what you'd buried. Days passed. Eli fixed her room, repaired the porch, even cooked her stew, something he hadn't made since Clara died. Lucy talked about her mama often. She said sometimes we find family in the people who are the most broken. She'd say, spoon clinking against the bowl, "She said you'd need me as much as I need you." Eli didn't argue, but when she fell asleep that night, he stepped out into the dark, looking toward the horizon where Hollow Creek faded into miles of dust. He knew he'd have to find out who Jonas Briggs was. She frowned. "You'll come back." Eli hesitated. "Course I will." She nodded like she didn't quite believe him, but she smiled anyway, that fragile, trusting smile that scared him more than any gun. The ride into town was quiet except for the sound of old country music from a passing truck and the buzz of flies. When he reached the gas station, a man in a white suit and hat stepped out, tall, polished, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You must be Mercer," he said. "I heard you picked up that Claiborne girl." Eli squinted. "You Jonas Briggs?" The man's smile widened. "Depends who's a skin. I'm a skin." Briggs took off his hat, revealing slicked back hair and the face of a man who'd never worked a day in the sun. "Marjorie owed me money. Lot of it. She ran before she could pay. Guess now she won't." Eli's fists clenched. So you sent her running. Briggs shrugged. She made her choices. I just collected what was mine. Eli stepped closer. That child's got nothing to do with your business. You stay away. Briggs chuckled. You sure about that, cowboy? Some debts get passed down, one way or another. For a heartbeat, the air turned cold. The 1950s may have been a cleaner, shinier decade for most folks, but in towns like Hollow Creek, the old rules still breathed. Men like Briggs owned the law. Men like Eli broke it if they had to. When Eli returned home that night, Lucy was waiting on the porch, hugging her rabbit tight. You came back, she whispered. He crouched down, brushing a lock of hair from her face. Told you I would. She smiled faintly. Mama said, when people keep their word, angels write it down. Eli didn't believe in angels, hadn't for a long time, but when she took his hand, something in him shifted again. He looked out toward the dark horizon and knew that whatever storm was coming, it wasn't over. Not for him, not for her. That night, when he blew out the lantern and looked through the window, maybe a trick of the wind, maybe not, but the sound of Rusty's frightened snort told him otherwise. The ghosts of Hollow Creek had finally come calling. The next morning, the light over Hollow Creek came grey and thin, stretching long across the empty plains. He'd seen flames again licking at the walls of his old house, the echo of his wife Clara's voice calling his name. She was sitting at the kitchen table, the stuffed rabbit propped up beside her plate. You look tired, she said gently, her big brown eyes studying him. Doctor with a wound. Did the fire come back? Eli froze mid-step. What did you say? She shrugged. You talk in your sleep. Mr. Eli, you said. Not again. Please, not again. Her tone was soft, but her words left scars. He sat down heavily, staring at his rough hands. Ain't no fire, sweetheart. Just dreams. But even as he said it, the air outside carried that strange, sharp scent again. Ash and rain. The smell of the past rising like a ghost. After breakfast, Eli saddled Rusty again. He had to know more about Jonas Briggs, and why the man's name made the sheriff's voice go quiet. He told Lucy he'd be gone a few hours, but she shook her head stubbornly. You said we don't lie, she said. You're gonna see that man again, he frowned. It ain't your business. Her words burned. He almost told her to stay, but the way she hugged that rabbit, the way her lip trembled just a little, reminded him of a promise he didn't even know he'd made. All right, he sighed. You ride with me, but you keep quiet and close. The old truck rattled down the dusty highway, heading toward Hollow Creek town. The wind pressed hard against the windshield, and Lucy hummed softly, eyes wide at the world flashing by. You ever scared of nothing, Mr. Eli? She asked. Every damn day, he said. Difference is, I keep going anyway. When they reached town, Jonas Briggs's place stood out like a sore thumb. Clean white walls, a shiny black car parked in the driveway, the kind of house built on money that never smelled like sweat. Eli told Lucy to stay in the truck. Lock the doors, he said. She nodded, clutching her rabbit tight. Briggs answered the door with a grin that made Eli's skin crawl. Back so soon, he said, holding a glass of whiskey, even though it was barely noon. Eli pushed past him. You're gonna tell me why that woman, Lucy's mama, was in your car? Briggs chuckled, setting his drink down. She worked for me. Cleaning, bookkeeping, that sort of thing. But she got too curious, asked about things that weren't hers to know. He walked to the window, staring out at the empty street. I warned her to stop digging. Eli stepped closer. Digging into what? Briggs turned, his smile fading. Into your past, Mercer. Eli froze. What the hell are you talking about? 10 years ago, Briggs said slowly. There was a fire out at your old ranch house. Sheriff said it was an accident, but some folks whispered it wasn't, said a man named Caleb Claiborne. Said it. The same Caleb who vanished. The husband of your little girl's mama. Eli's stomach turned cold. You saying the man who killed my wife was Lucy's father? Briggs finished for him. Silence. Only the ticking of a clock between them. Eli's heart thundered in his chest, the world tilting sideways. You're lying, he muttered. Briggs smirked. Maybe. But tell me this, why do you think that woman came here? To you, of all people. Maybe she wanted to make things right before her time ran out. Eli lunged forward, grabbing him by the collar. You don't talk about her like that. Briggs didn't flinch. Careful, Mercer. You got a little girl now. Be a shame if she ended up like her mama. That was the moment something inside Eli snapped. You come near her, near my ranch, and I swear I'll end whatever deal the devil made keeping you breathin'. He let go and stormed out, shaking. He was watching me, she whispered, through the window. Eli drove them home fast, dust flying behind like smoke. Neither spoke for miles. The truth twisted in his gut like a knife. And now his daughter was under Eli's roof, sleeping in the same house where Clara's ashes once fell. That night, thunder rolled over the plains, heavy and long. Eli stood on the porch, staring at the horizon. Lucy came out quietly, blanket wrapped around her shoulders. You're scared, she said softly. Ain't scared, he lied. Just thinking. She looked up at him, the lantern light flickering on her small face. Mama said fears just love trying to come home. He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time, he saw more than the daughter of a stranger. He saw a second chance, a reason to stop drowning in his ghosts. But when he turned back toward the barn, the doors creaked open by themselves. A faint smell of smoke drifted out, not from a fire, but from something left behind. He walked closer, heart pounding. There, hanging on the nail beam, was a charred photograph, half burned, half whole, showing his wife Clara, and beside her, a man he'd never seen before. A man with the same eyes as Lucy. Eli dropped to his knees, the world spinning around him. The past wasn't buried, it was back, and it had found its way home through the only person innocent enough to carry it. He looked back at the porch where Lucy waited, holding her rabbit close, whispering softly to herself. Her voice carried through the wind like a prayer. Mama said fire don't always destroy. Sometimes it just shows what's been hiding. And as Telly stared at the horizon glowing faintly red under the storm clouds, he finally understood. The fire wasn't over. It was just beginning again. Night refused to sleep. Wine tore through the fields, whispering like something alive. Inside the old Mercer ranch house, the oil lamp flickered weakly, throwing broken shadows across the walls. Eli sat at the table, the half-burned photograph spread before him, a man whose face twisted his insides. He'd never seen him before, but those eyes, they were Lucy's eyes. Wide, gentle, haunted. He turned the photo over. Eli's throat tightened. He ran his thumb over the charred edge, wondering who had written it. Clara, Marjorie Claiborne, or someone who'd known both. The storm outside rumbled, shaking the old windows. Eli's mind refused to rest. The pieces of the past were circling, ready to fall into place. Reverend Shaw, who'd buried Clara and signed the report that night the house burned. The church sat on a hill just past the creek, its steeple bent slightly from years of wind. Inside, Shaw sat alone in the pews, cleaning candle holders. His beard was white now, his hands slow but steady. When he looked up, his eyes narrowed. Eli Mercer, ain't seen you in near a decade. Eli set the photograph down on the wooden pew. You officiated Clara's funeral. You remember anything strange about that fire? Shaw studied the picture, his expression hardening. Son, where'd you find this? In my barn. Hung like it was waiting for me. The Reverend exhaled slowly. Then it's time you knew. We all thought the fire was an accident, but it wasn't. Caleb Claiborne started it. He'd been drinking, furious after learning Marjorie left him. Came to your ranch looking for her. Thought she'd run there. When Clara tried to stop him, Eli's chest clenched. She burned because of him. Shaw nodded softly. She saved her ranch hands that night before the roof fell. Never told you. You were gone selling cattle. Folks said he died in the blaze, but I never saw a body. The words hit Eli like a hammer. He stumbled back, gripping the pew for balance. So he's alive. Could be, Shaw said. Collecting debts. That man's got long arms in this town. Eli's blood ran cold. He thought of Briggs's smirk, the threat in his voice, and the way Lucy said her mama had been running. It was warning. Ray of moonlight to touch the barn floor, shining over the burned photograph, still lying in the dirt. Later that night, after the sheriff came and the body was taken. Lucy sat beside Eli on the porch. Her voice was small, tired. He wasn't bad all the way through. No, Eli said softly. Just lost her far to find the way back. She leaned against him. You ain't lost, Mr. Eli. You just forgot the road home. The storm had passed, but he knew the real reckoning wasn't over yet. Briggs had known about Caleb, and he'd let it all happen. There was still one debt left to settle. Eli stood, jaw tight, eyes cold as the steel on his hip. Go inside, Lucy, he said quietly. Lock the door. Where you going? She asked. To make sure no one ever comes for you again. And with that, the giant cowboy walked off into the fading rain, his shadow stretching long under the silver moon, the shadow of a man who'd lost everything but found something worth fighting for again. The sun rose slow over Hollow Creek, grey and gold bleeding together like an old scar reopening. The storm had passed, but the land still smelled of gunpowder and rain. Eli Mercer stood in front of his mirror, shirt half buttoned, bandage tight around his shoulder. His reflection looked older than it had yesterday. Maybe it was the blood. Maybe it was the truth. Behind him, the house was quiet. Lucy slept on the couch, wrapped in a quilt too big for her, her stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin. He'd carried her there after the sheriff left. After the long night of questions and silence, the child had cried herself to sleep clutching Eli's hand. And even in slumber, her small fingers hadn't let go until morning. The hole that had lived in his chest since Clara died, that gaping wound that no whiskey could fill. It didn't ache quite the same. It hurt different. It hurt alive. But there was still one ghost left walking. Jonas Briggs. The sheriff had taken Caleb's body at dawn. Worlds better off without him, he'd said, too easily. But Eli saw the glint in the sheriff's eyes, the way his words avoided Briggs's name. And he knew Hollow Creek still belonged to that snake. Eli loaded his revolver, the same Colt he'd sworn never to draw again after the war. His hand didn't shake this time. You'll never see another fire, he whispered. Not while I'm still breathin'. The road into town was quiet. The rain had washed away the dust, but the air still tasted like smoke. One church, one devil hiding behind white walls and money. Briggs's office sat above the general store, the windows lined with curtains, too clean for a town so poor. He didn't knock. He just opened the door and stepped into the lion's den. Well, he said, turning. The hero returns. Eli closed the door behind him. You used Claiborne. Sent him after her. After all of us. Briggs sipped his whiskey. He was useful. Drunk. Angry. Men like that need a leash. I just told him where to find his wife. I didn't like the match. You might as well have, Eli said. Briggs chuckled. You think you're any better? You've killed before, Mercer. Maybe not with fire. But I've heard stories. Eli stepped closer. The floorboards creaked. Ain't trying to wash nothing. Just ending it. Briggs set his glass down, eyes narrowing. You gonna shoot me in cold blood, right here in town? Eli didn't answer. He reached into his coat, but instead of drawing the gun, he pulled out the child photograph and threw it onto the desk. That's what you did, he said, voice low. That's the face of what you burned for your greed. Briggs's smirk faltered. For the first time, Eli saw something crack in that polished mask. Briggs stared at the picture, jaw tight. You think I care? He said finally. The world's cruel. I just learned to own it. Eli's voice went quiet. Then you're the only man left who don't got nothing worth losing. And in that moment, Briggs reached for his drawer. Eli's hand moved first. The revolver came up smooth as breath. One shot. Thunder. Glass shattered. His whiskey bottle hit the floor, spilling dark amber across the wood. For a long second, the only sound was the ticking of the clock and the slow drip of blood. Eli holstered the gun. That's for Clara, for Marjorie, and for the little girl you'll never touch. The townsfolk stared as he passed, whispering his name. No one stopped him. Not one soul dared. By the time he reached the edge of town, he heard the church bells ringing. When he returned to the ranch, Lucy was waiting on the porch, rabbit in hand, eyes searching the horizon. When she saw him, she ran, barefoot, wind in her hair, and threw her arms around his waist. You came back, she whispered. He knelt, wincing at the pain in his shoulder, and smiled, a real one, cracked but honest. Told you I would. For a while, they just stood there, quiet except for the sound of the wind brushing through the dry grass. Then Lucy looked up, eyes shining. So what happens now, Mr. Eli? He looked out at the plains, endless and golden. Now we live, he said softly, and we remember 'em right. That night, Clara's cross stood. Lucy helped him, holding the lantern steady. When they were done, goodbye, Mama. Thank you for sending him. Eli looked at her, eyes misting. What makes you think she sent me? Lucy smiled faintly. 'Cause you were the only one who stopped. He couldn't speak. He just pulled her close. The stars came out one by one, bright and cold above the plains. The wind was gentle now, no ghosts in it, just peace. The cowboy who'd lost everything had finally found the one thing he didn't know he needed, a reason to come home. And as the lamplight faded from the windows of the old ranch house, Hollow Creek slept, quieter than it had in years, watching the dawn